Good evening. This is Defacto Review, a weekly analysis of Mongolia's latest political, economic, and social issues by economist and columnist Mr. Jaral Sahin.
Good evening.
And I'll be your host, Tikshirult. This week we'll discuss the seizure of large amounts of cash from Ozomatli Railway Bureau officials, the new tax bracket, and the issuing of a new bond by the Mongolian government. So this past week, one of the headlines that gathered a lot of attention was the deputy head of the Ozomatli Railway Bureau Transport Organization Department was found in possession of 7.3 billion tugruks in yuan, euros, dollars, and in tugruk. And this official and other related officials had this money in their homes. And a lot of people are wondering how an employee of a public company or a state-owned company could have this much, this much money, just this much cash lying around. So what is your take on this issue?
Well, you're right. Everybody's surprised. 7.4 billion MNT, out of which 1.6 million US dollar in the houses. This man and his wife got recently several luxury houses, and there's so much money. So certainly this money is coming from something wrong. According to the rumor, it says, because it's, whether he is criminal or it's a criminal case or not, it is a matter of court decisions. So far, the allegation is that the person who is organizing the whole we call it echelon or artillery of consisting 50 wagons of railway, and every day some 15 to 16 the echelon goes through the border with China. We should note that they have different gauges of railways. One is wider, the other is narrower, and it is shifting the whole wagons to the other tracks, to other gauge is very hard work, and only the capacity of Ireg, almost 95% of our trade line, port, we call, is going through this border, Ireg and Zamingwood. Only around 15 echelons goes, and the capacity is so small, and around 5 or 6 echelons are for transit cargoes. So the remaining are to, by the decision of this man, distributed, and there are so many demand, in particular from coal exporting companies to export their coal to China. If they will stay in line, it will take months to go. And so that's why people bribe them. They say even up to 500 million MNT, bribe them, and then they will get the permission to go through. So that's what allegedly people understand. So if you take the bigger picture of this crime, first, certainly it is a bribe. This money cannot be produced by this man. It is coming from somewhere, and he is to explain at the court from where it comes. Second, it is a clear index of monopoly of Ulaanbaatar Railway. Ulaanbaatar Railway is a joint stock company between Russian and Mongolian governments. Both are not very famous for their better management, public management. And in particular, this UB Railway is really a bottleneck of Mongolian economy, because it doesn't have a parallel road. It's just one road where they are, just one road with several exchange stations or stations. And the Russians long time ago promised, even the President Putin, that there will be parallel road and it will be electrified because it's diesel. All the Russian railways work on electric power. On the Mongolian one is on diesel, and yet so backward the transport system, and yet so much theft happening inside. According to a source, there are two ways of making money at this UB railways. One is procurement, mostly the Russian side, supplying the wagons, locomotives with very expensive prices. Mongolian side, as people are making money like this guy, organizing transport, giving priority since it is a higher demand, the lower supply. So this is the second issue. The third issue of this big picture is how does Mongolian court system work? Because the man, when he was arrested, he had only 1 day. Next day, he was supposed this detention to be continued for another month, and the proper permission is to be given by the judge, who had refused, who had said that this man has a right to attorney, which is right. He is right, the judge. But however, what shall we do in this case when the public officer is found with all the witnesses, so much money, and yet he had released him for another 3 days till next Monday? So it caused a lot public debate, and many people really dislike the situation. So it shows also the hole in our legal system, what to do in such a case. So there are three things of bigger picture here. By the way, with this Batu crime connected, alleged crime connected, there are 22 officials from UB Railway and the railway departments are being investigated according to a source these days. So hopefully, at the end of this whole thing, UB Railways management will be a bit changing. But it's finally it's a high time to buy back this railway shares from the Russian government. That's, I think, the Mongolian government must do immediately. Demand the Russians to sell or something. Otherwise, it is really destroying not only health, but also destroying our economy, our morale, and our legal system.
Let's move on to our second topic for this week. Beginning on January 1st of this year, Mongolia introduced a new tax bracket for income tax with the amendment on the law on income tax. So with the new amendment, people are going to be taxed at, people that are making over 10 million tugurs per month will be taxed at a higher rate than people that are making less than that. So it was found out that 99.9% of people make less money than that threshold anyway. So this only affects the 0.1% of earners in Mongolia. So they're going to be taxed at the following rate. So between $0 to $10 million per month will be taxed at 10% of their income. 10 to 15 million per month will be taxed at 15% of their income, and 15 to 20 million dollars. People earning 15 to 20 million tugurs will be taxed at 20% of their income. So this is the first time that we're introducing such a tax bracket. So what do you think the economic effects will be following this change in the tax system?
There is a long-awaited decisions to have sliding scale taxation in Mongolia. Higher income, pay higher rate. It's instead of flat tax system we have been implementing for years since 1996 or 7, which had helped Mongolian economy a lot. We had flat taxes of personal income tax, profit tax, company tax, etc. 4 major taxes are being at the level of 10% for quite some time. Now, because this inequality in the society ever extending, they have been doing this step. Now, higher income, higher interest, higher rate of taxations. At the recent conference on political, economic, and legal solutions to current problems of Mongolia, Prime Minister had been mentioning several interesting facts. He said that during the last 30 years, we have reached a lot positive achievements, but there are negative too. One of them is inequality and justice increasing in Mongolia. He said that 2.7% of the citizens have only salary over 3.5 million MNT per month. Less than 3% of people have 3.5 million salary. It's around $1,000 at the current rate. But 67% has a salary less than 1 million. It's around 300 some US dollar. The other thing is, interesting fact, he said that 75% of total savings in the country are owned by only 3% of saving account holders. So these two facts show clearly very much inequality of income in the country. Because of that, they are changing now the flat tax system, as you have mentioned. But it's good or not? Well, first, it is covering only a few percent of the population. Okay, but however, it is a start of new taxation system in the country, because now, in order to pay accurately the tax according to this law, one is to make own estimation of your own income. Nowadays in Mongolia, the employer pays taxes for employee. Thus, employees sometimes not fully understand how much they pay as a tax to the state. It's not very good, because democracy is stronger if the direct tax payment is on, so that the employer pays the full salary, employee pays their own whatever tax system is. Now, technically, it's more easier with the current IT capacity. But the Minister of Finance is afraid of losing income of revenues. But however, if the people pay directly their taxes, they will be more responsible for their next voting at the next election, and they will demand more transparency and better governance quality from the state. So in that sense, I think it's a good start of direction, but a good direction to start with. But however, I think it will take quite a long time for Mongolia. People pay directly their taxes. It's one. Secondly, taxing more the private sector on the other side is decreasing the investment, which otherwise they will do in their businesses. Which more investment means more jobs. More jobs means this inequality, more income. So we should not forget that this kind of connections of taxation and economy.
So this change was introduced to fight inequality, but just because that there's a tax bracket, people that are earning more are going to be taxed at a higher rate. So instead of a flat tax, this creates a sort of inequality between incomes, where higher earners are expected to contribute more of their income. So what do you think on this issue? Do you think that this type of inequality is worth it to fight the greater inequality in society?
It depends on where this inequality comes from. If state public officials are bribed and stealing money or stealing property through which they are becoming more richer, then certainly this is the one to fight with. And we should fight that corruption. I think that will give more chance to people, because corruption is, stealing opportunities for other people, for smaller companies, for who are not connected with the government. So first of all, it is not the taxation issue, though it is. However, by the way, this IMF, World Bank, they demand this sliding scale taxations depending on income. But however, we should not forget that 100 million MNT income, 10% is 10 million. From 1 million income MNT, it's only 100,000 MNT. So you see the difference. The percentage is also a tax equalizer in a way, because the higher income, even at the same rate, the higher income person pays much higher than the lower income person. So it is not always a solution. Flat taxes are in many countries used, and it is good for the economy. It gives more easier accounting procedure of income. So it is questionable if the tax is the solution. But however, many countries also follow that sliding scale. But in case of Mongolia, the first thing to help us to decrease the inequality is corruption. And that's the reason why this current government is paying a lot of attention to combating corruption. But unfortunately, many cases are disappearing slowly. And many people, for example, the development bank cases, some 20 persons are arrested, detained, and now after a few months, none of them are still no one is in prison, but the cases are still not solved. So this is the current true face of our legal system in the country.
Let's move on to our third topic for this week. We've recently finished paying off the Chinggis bond after quite some time, and this year Mongolia is scheduled to pay back the Kirege bond, which was worth $800 million, and next year we're supposed to pay the Horalte bond for $600 million US. And to pay back these two bonds, the government is opting to refinance it through raising of another bond. So the Mongolian government issued a new bond for $650 million US for the international market, and they were expecting to release this bond for 11 to 12%. 138 investors opted to pay $4 billion US for this bond. So the interest rate went down to 8.65%. So we've talked about the Chinggis bond when it was first paid, and so technically we're paying this debt with another debt. So do you think that this is the only way to go forward, or is there another way to pay back the prior loans through another method?
10 years ago, Mongolian government had issued first international bond on the international market, and they called that bond somehow Chinggis Khan bond. And I'm surprised why they would call on debt with the name of the great Khan. And ironically, the second one was also with another Khan names, which sounds very stupid actually. And thanks God, this $650 million bond for last week is not called yet by any big names, and hopefully they will not. It sounds very funny because the Chinggis Khan was never borrowing, I think, before any money from anyway. Anyway, of course, this is only way to pay in the current situation the bond payment, which is coming, as you said, $650 million. Now they will pay that, and the Minister of Finance was happy to raise instead of this bond, instead of 11 to 12%, only at the level of 8.65%. Well, he said that he presented as a big success. Well, it's a very relative term. Success in terms of paying on time without any problem they debt. But however, if you take a longer term, we have been paying for last 10 years with bond with another bond with another bond, sometimes with higher rate, sometimes lower rate. But however, the issue is what we have done with the proceeds of the bond. And we are not very much clear. We didn't have any transparent, independent report on the first bond, Chinggis bond, and we know that it was misused, and many politicians were released from their crimes because the investigation period of the case is expired. We have such a strange provision in our law, which basically the politicians made themselves for themselves. If they have been using properly, if they have been using US dollar foreign currency proceeds for creating foreign currency, then we wouldn't have problem. But unfortunately, it is not the case. So we, even up to now, we are paying the debt by debt. So whether we use properly or not that bond proceeds is a matter of governance issue, quality of management, and the purpose of the projects they will use for. None of them are very clear up to now. Hopefully, it will be changed with current combating with corruption situation. And according to the Minister of Finance, they will not issue any bond, commercial bond, until 2028, and by which they will completely to pay all bonds. Because to raise such kind of big money for the economy, you should have a very strong case. The reason why our bond rate became lower than expected is also, according to the Minister of Finance, we kept the Mongolian credit rating at the level of B for last year, as we have paid all on time our Chinggis bond, etc., and obligation and other obligations, and plus the currency reserve of Mongolia had reached 3.4 billion MNT at the end of last year, because by fall September it was around 2.4, which is way lower than covering 4 or 5 months import of the country. So it was almost at the brink of default, according to the Minister of Finance, and IMF was just next step to go again to ask money to save. So that's what happened. They got 650 billion MNT, 650 million US dollar bond, and paying the Grega bond.
This has been it for this week's Defacto Review. Thank you for joining us for this week's 3 most important topics covering politics, the economy, and society in Mongolia.
Thank you very much for being with us, and we try to accommodate the highest demand in the review. We are very happy that you are with us, and please rewatch our program on our website too. Thank you very much for watching us.